Hello, fam. It is so nice to be with you this Friday. This is Wine Talk Fridays, and this is a new iteration of our live programming. Before, I think many of you knew that I was a part of a podcast, and it was the Swirl Suite. And we had our last podcast last year
Oh,
in 2025, which was great. We did it for 11 years, and
wow.
not too many
Crazy.
people can say that we did it for 11 years. And so I kind of wanted to bring that format back, but different, and just have conversations with wine producers and like what were they thinking and about their products. So today, Amanda Thompson is our first guest. I need to get
What
some
an
sound effects.
honor.
And she is the co-owner. Is that correct?
Actually, the owner really, but yeah.
Okay, excuse me. She is the owner of Naughty, and it is. I love how she has Naughty AF, and we'll just take our minds there. But it is a alcohol-free wine. And she's just got the most interesting backstory. She used to be a broadcaster. Then she decided to like change her life completely and go to culinary school, and not like just an ordinary culinary school, but the best in the world to and she produced champagne, and then she took her journey here. So Amanda, please say hello to the people.
It's fantastic to be with you, and what an honor to be on your first new format. Thank you for having me, Leslie. It's wonderful to meet you and all your fans. Yeah, I'd love to get into the naughty conversation, and it's always funny when I hear people like you intro me, and it kind of is a crazy story. I'm sure people listening are like, hold on a second. Broadcasting, champagne, Paris, non-alcoholic wine. Yeah, it's a crazy story, right?
I know, but those make the best stories. Like, who wants to
I guess.
sit next to
I
somebody who
guess.
just counts beans all day? So, okay, first of all, let's talk about the broadcasting. You started broadcasting your first career. Is
Yeah,
that
years
correct?
and years. Yeah, straight from university. I got into television production, and very quickly I started to do radio and television, and it was originally film and the arts, and it sort of really was a very special career actually. These were the days when journalists got a bit of respect in the old days. Um,
Imagine that.
I know. And yeah, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I met my husband at the Cannes Film Festival. He was a publicist and I was a journalist doing the interviews. And I think part of what I loved, Leslie, was I loved the arts. So film, fashion, music, all the fun stuff. But equally, I loved getting to the nub, the heart of a story, finding out what made people tick, learning about people. And so it was quite a shift for me when I became an entrepreneur, because, of course, yes, I'm still in the spotlight, but I'm answering other people's questions. I have to share a lot more. I used to be the one who really enjoyed the learning.
So, okay, so that shift to entrepreneurship, which is it's like a moth to the flame, quite honestly. It pulls you there. It's not for everyone. But what was that pull towards entrepreneur? Because I'm quite sure broadcasting by itself is a pretty fabulous life.
Yeah, I really loved it. I was just part of that shift. Anyone really young watching Gen Z, it's kind of hard to really picture the old world depending on your age. But I was doing this before social media, before cameras were everywhere. So I always say to people, Leslie, that was when the parties were really fun, because nobody was looking.
Right, right, right.
Now we live in a world where everybody is aware that everybody is looking,
Hmm,
right?
hmm.
Things are different, and good and bad, whatever. But the art space was sort of morphing much more into showbiz. And actually, hilariously, I'm married to a publicist in the film and TV world. But in the old days, I would interview people, big celebrities, big names, whoever they were, and we would sit down and have a coffee or have some lunch, and I wouldn't have the publicist or the agent or the people
Right.
or the team
Mm-hmm.
kind of sitting around and checking questions and asking what you're going to ask. And so the world was changing. And equally, Leslie, I was always aware as a broadcaster, I was a pawn in the editor's game. I guess in the way that actors want to produce or direct, getting a bit more control. So I'd had
Right.
this
Right.
wonderful career. The world was changing in the art space. It was morphing much more together with showbiz. Cameras were everywhere. You didn't have the freedom. And I was kind of feeling like I was really done with it in a lovely way, not in a negative way. Because I remember there was
Mm-hmm.
a moment, Leslie, when somebody at a sort of dinner party said to me, Amanda, who do you really want to interview? And I'm not for a moment suggesting back in the day I interviewed everybody that was wonderful, but I was lucky enough to sit down with some incredible people, and I was kind of struggling to answer. And you know, when you kind of feel like that was
Yeah.
a really wonderful career, now
Mm-hmm.
it's time to do something bigger, different, bigger. And I sort of really was quite singular throughout my childhood and throughout my early career. It's not that I'm not a team player. I like to control things. So, I mean, when you have like the Myers-Briggs test or any of those
Mm-hmm.
tests that everybody does in the corporate world, I like to be leading. And so I felt like that would be a natural sort of transition to do my own thing and be the mistress of my own destiny. Of course, a little naivety is a wonderful thing, or a lot of naivety in the case of, you know, being a first-time entrepreneur. And I wanted to really learn my stripes. So at that point, I had my heart set on building a champagne brand. So I wanted to work
Mm-hmm.
in fine wine. And so it was all about the training for me. I guess in my mind, it's about the learning, the métier in France,
Right.
you know, the
Uh-huh.
profession. And so that was what led me to put the Cordon Bleu wine diploma on my credit card. Yeah, don't do
You
that
put
at
it on
home.
your credit card.
Don't do that at home. But bear in mind, I had a husband at this point, so I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
literally going to be homeless, you know, because you know, I had no plan B, but equally, I had a safety net.
Right. Right.
Yeah, but it was a big deal to leave a very successful career with a salary that we relied on to go and retrain and pretty much start again. I mean, that was quite a thing to do. And I was one of the older students. And I was quite a different personality than a lot of the students because they were
Mm-hmm.
young and new to the profession. And I had very fixed ideas about what I wanted to do. So when I write my book one day, there's some funny stories in there. I remember my teacher at Cordon Bleu. He was very confused by me. We're great friends now. I had a glass of champagne with him in Paris a few months ago. He just couldn't work out what I was about and who I was. And I don't think he even trusted journalists, to be honest, even back then. So yeah, that was kind of a crazy story.
You know what? I think it being an older student, and it probably like older for you was like 30 something, what have you, but you have perspective. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
Like you realize that you you could do something else if this did not work out versus
Right.
somebody who's right out of school and they're faced with like who am I going to be, what am I, and so they're a little nervous in the
Yeah.
learning. And
Yeah.
you had, not saying that other students didn't have a purpose, but you were driven,
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, to say, okay, let me understand this more than just being a casual observer. Is that fair?
Exactly. I think you're bang on. And I think speaking to a wonderful Black woman in the profession, as somebody
Mm-hmm.
who's half Asian, I think that I was also so struck at, to put a positive spin on us in the
Mm-hmm.
industry, we would be recognized and we would be
Yes.
remembered.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember just to scoot back on that topic, during COVID, I put a call out for Black and Asian somms across the world. And to be fair, I found quite a few more Asian somms, but I was really struggling to find black sommeliers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I remember being pretty pissed off about that. And I was like, this is an industry that we can be recognized in. So I've always kind of flipped the switch in my mind and gone, okay, I've got confidence. I've had a successful career. Yes, I don't look like the typical person, but that's also a good thing because people are going to notice me. And so I think I've always had a bit of activism in me, which is just to
Right.
agitate a bit and to stand up and be noticed. So I think I was relatively fearless in that respect, because I know a lot of people, and I'm sure you've got your own stories, Leslie, a lot of people who don't look like the typical
Right.
historical wine person feel automatically like they might not fit in. And that's a whole other conversation I'd love to have
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
at another time, because
Yes.
there was a lot in that for me, and I bet you've got some fascinating stories.
Oh, 100%. Yes. I need to come over and us share a bottle or two of,
Yes, for
of
sure.
of wine and champagne. And so, the other thing I found very striking is you always had a very clean living lifestyle. And
Yeah.
so you
I mean,
took
at
that,
least superficially. I mean,
right.
mostly. I'm not an angel, just to be clear.
But your diet habits, right,
Yeah.
were,
I mean,
yes.
so what, like the 75-80% thing. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Just go along with the story. This it helps.
Yes. Yes.
um, so when you decided that you wanted to pursue champagne and production, you went for the most refined champagne. You were looking for very little dosage. You were looking for, you know, extra nature. Was that part of like your clean living, or just like it didn't exist? Because some people do it because it didn't exist and you wanted to create a brand that had it.
Exactly. That's interesting you picked that out. Yes. So with wine, there was this really strange, interesting sort of point for me, which was the world's best wine in France, at least. I became an expert in French wine.
Mhm.
As you can imagine, Leslie, we love the French, but we scooted around the wine world in a week, I think. I'm sure they've improved that since then. But I'm always like in America or Australia going, can we drink some of your wine? I want to learn, because I trained in France. Um,
Mhm.
so I was really struck that the best Burgundies, the best champagnes, all my favorite artisanal winemakers were often making incredible biodynamic, often, and organic at the least wine. But it just wasn't seen as a USP, because you've got this strange sort of interesting piece around the world with, I love the wine world. I trained in it, but as you know well, and anyone who is listening to us knows, it's kind of a snobby, cliquey group, and we have strange ways of doing things in the fine wine world. And we
Yes.
shout about some
Mhm.
things, we're negative about others. If you actually lift the veil, the best wine mostly is made in those really pure ways. And then you've got this strange juxtaposition where the really kind of cheap everyday wine, unfortunately, is not made in those ways. But there's
Mhm.
no real obvious way for consumers to know about it. And then on the other side, you've got kind of clever marketeers selling kind of cheap wine, but saying it's clean. There were so many smoke and mirrors, I think, and often they just don't marry up together in the way that I think tech, fashion, other innovators have managed to find those sorts of holistic unions. So I was always really interested, as technically a wine snob. I was a wine snob. And when I say snob, I don't mean snobby and negative about other people's wine. I mean snobby about what I was drinking.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
fussy. So fussy about what I was drinking. So for me, the interesting opportunity existed, which was all about respecting history and tradition to the utmost and recognizing great winemakers as artists, yet also seeing how one could innovate and make the branding quite democratic and really cut through all the confusing noise that us
Right.
winemakers really
Uh-huh.
muddle the public with. So that was my real sweet spot. I realized that after I'd worked with champagne and a really great, the best organic prosecco that was out there under my brand, I realized that that was kind of the thing I could do, which was take great wine, sell it at the right price point, and make it quite democratic in terms of people's understanding. And
Okay.
I also started to realize, Leslie, there was a lot of white space there, because you either had great winemakers being secretive about how great their wine was, or you had marketeers shouting about their wine that perhaps wasn't very good. But why
Mm-hmm.
did you have both? And that for me is where the magic can happen.
So then I 100% understand. I'm all for it, a fan. But then you took it one step further
Yeah.
and you decided to start producing alcohol-free wine, which at the time you started doing that, there were some out there, and we don't have to talk about how less than great they were, but what made you decide to do that? And what was like the initial reaction? Because I'm quite sure people thought you had like lost your marbles and
Bang on! Because I was, as you've smartly identified, I was very early to market. It was 2019, so not really that long ago. But I was
Mhm.
first to market and say that I was talking to wine lovers. So I think whenever I talk about all the legacy brands, they've done their own job successfully, whether it's the sparkling apple juices that are famous in America, or whether
Right.
it's the
Mhm.
really big legacy brands that you can buy in all the supermarkets for under $10. There's nothing wrong with them, but they just don't talk to wine people. And I think there's
Mhm.
a few reasons. Clearly, the liquid is too sugary, and it isn't sort of the palate isn't right for wine people, and then the brand also is not right for wine people. So it existed very successfully in its own little niche. But wine lovers, I hadn't even noticed it, to be fair, until I
Mhm.
started to realize. So I guess I'm still to this day considered the first person to create good non-alcoholic wine for wine people. I think that was the point of difference. And to your point, yeah, they thought I was utterly crazy, insane, wasting my time, an idiot, you name it. And I think what's great about having a successful first career and being very ambitious, and being very focused, is the more people told me that, the more I realized I was onto something. And what I
Mm.
mean by that is, I sort of had this really lovely way of going, the more you think I'm irrelevant, the more white space I've got to innovate. And, it's really taken only the last couple of years for people to start to really notice. I mean, they noticed me. The wine industry noticed me very early. But in terms of all of the brands now, every man and his dog is now launching a non alcoholic wine. The problem they've all got in 2026 is, one, I'm quite far ahead. Two, I'm always innovating. And three, if you don't focus on quality, you're wasting your time. So I think that a lot of people have piled in thinking there's a quick buck to be made. Now, I know my numbers and I know other people's numbers, and there's no quick buck to be made, because I always say consumers aren't idiots. I can sell
Mhm.
anything once, I'm great at selling. But if my wine doesn't taste good, you're never going to buy it again. So,
Right.
I always say to people, what are you trying to achieve here? If you think there's a quick marketing play, you can make noise, but no one's going to come back for your wine. So I think that you've got a bit of a strange moment now where every single wine brand is jumping on non-alcoholic. They don't realize, one, how hard I've worked already. There's a couple of
Mhm.
us, two brands, me and a couple of others. Two, how far ahead we are. And three, the fact that you have to do something really engaging and different if you're going to get the consumers to sit up and take notice. So, because we've got quite a big lag at the moment in 2026 with the noise and investors piling in and everybody
Mhm.
realizing it's the future, and actually the numbers and the data and the sales catching up, because all of the retailers are only just now starting to realize they need a great non-alcoholic wine set, and not
Yes.
just the legacy brands. So just to give you a bit of, well, it's breaking news for us, but we've just done a really lovely new US national deal with Fresh Markets, the Fresh Market across the
Oh,
US.
okay.
Yeah, and they have taken my whole range. as the benchmark in the premium quality space. So moments like
Congratulations.
that, thank you so much. I mean, that was blew my mind. I mean, it's kind of unheard of to launch with 5, right? So, it's happening, but I've put
Mhm.
in years of work behind this. So I want others to rise with me, but I only want them rising with me if they're raising quality, because otherwise, if you and I were at dinner tonight and we're trying
Mhm.
non-alcoholic wines that are sugary, depressing, bear no relationship to something we're going to want to drink again, we can easily be lost from the category. So that's the danger that is an issue.
I think you bring up such good points because when we are pouring your wines, initially people are like, no, with that,
Exactly.
I want something with the alcohol because most wine drinkers are not syrupy sweet wine drinkers. And so what they equate with that are sugary grape juice rather than wine. So for those who are uninitiated, can you explain to people what the dealcoholization process is and why it's such a huge factor in if you're going to select an alcohol-free wine?
That's a really important question. I'm assuming people watching your work have varying degrees of wine knowledge.
Right.
So,
Mhm.
so for anyone who wants to get in deeper, we've got all kinds of things online. They can drop me an email on the website. But just to really sort of sum it up, as you've suggested, so there are essentially 2 methods to dealcoholize wine. One is called vacuum distillation, and the other is a method called spinning cone. What they're both essentially doing is removing the alcohol and separating it from the liquid. But the challenge you have is, how do you do that and retain the vinous, the wine-like
Right.
qualities?
Mhm.
That's the real challenge, and where the magic happens is can you do that? And so everything that happens prior is relevant, in the sense that some I've played around with all kinds of grapes, all kinds of wines with my makers. And like, for example, let's take a grape like Pinot Noir, which I'm sure
Mhm.
lots of people know, and it's one of my favorite grapes in Burgundy, but it's a very fine, delicate grape, and it's
It
very
is.
difficult to
Mhm.
make a good Pinot Noir. And for me, it's a struggle to de-alcoholize, because you end up with something quite thin, and it doesn't really just give you much of the character. So conversely, we found that we making Naughty Rouge and my new elevated red with Naughty Monte with Syrah. So Shiraz, a
Mm. Mhm.
really high alcohol, muscular, spicy grape that actually, it's got huge amounts of personality. And we find when we de-alcoholize it, as is from South Africa, and they're doing what they call dry farmed vines. So you've got really intense heat, and the vines are working so hard to get their flavor and
Yeah.
personality. So it starts life as a really personality-driven Syrah, or Shiraz, as you also call that grape.
Mhm.
And when we de-alcoholize it, you end up with something that is, of course, it's got no alcohol, so hasn't got that big structure and muscle, but it's got some structure. It's got some tannin. It's got some spice. It's got that unmistakable Syrah or Shiraz nose. So for me, what I was always setting out to achieve was not to replicate wine, because you can't do that. There's no alcohol. I was
Right.
trying to create something that was reminiscent, that sat alongside, and I could elegantly transition from a glass of alcoholic wine to my naughty wine and it not be jarring. That was always
Mhm.
my philosophy. Because occasionally people say, oh, when I'm doing my tasting, if they're SOMs or they've trained in wine, you have a little tick for your alcohol. It gives the body and the structure and the mouthfeel. There is none. So there's certain preconceptions that people have to sort of let go. And then you'll know, I don't know anyone watching who's ever played the blind tasting sport, but you mentioned the negative preconceptions we've both talked about that people have
Mhm.
with alcoholic wine. And so what's been really fun, and I don't do these blind tastings, but people do externally. And I had one was done in Paris, and they thought my sparkling Chardonnay was a grower champagne, which just shows you that I wouldn't say to you off the bat, my naughty sparkling Chardonnay is exactly like a grower champagne. But of course, we bring so many preconceptions to the
Mhm,
table, tasting
mhm.
non-alcoholic wine, that we're not always thinking objectively. So I guess I felt like my work was done in the sense that it could sit alongside, and that's always been my philosophy: to improve quality, to innovate, to be low sugar, to be organic where possible, and really just to create elegant wines that don't have alcohol.
No, that makes sense, and the feedback that I get when somebody who is a wine drinker, um, they said, they really can't tell the difference except they say, "I don't feel the burn."
Right. Burn is a very good point.
Yes.
And what's interesting, Leslie, is lots of really creative mixologists across the US. So behind the bar in their fabulous cocktail areas, they often play around and make things with chili, and and that's
Mhm.
fantastic. But with us, our brand is a bit like when you've got a non-alcoholic beer. I'm not a beer drinker, but a lot of my friends, it's like you've got beer or non-alcoholic beer,
Yeah.
you've got
Mhm.
wine, and you've got naughty. For me, there's that simplicity in my brand, and then other people can play around if they want to make really exciting cocktails.
No, that 100% makes sense. And I'd love to see that, it is so well received. I mean, so much so you won an award in 2025 for your business model and Naughty being out there. Can you tell people about your recent accolade?
Yeah, that recent one was crazy. That was the drinks business, which of course is predominantly historically focuses on alcohol. So that was a really lovely flag in the sand for me, being accepted in the mainstream drinks world, which was very important to me, not because I don't love every single one of our focused, sober, non-alcoholic drinkers. I mean, Naughty is right at the heart of that scene. But for me to become a household name, the bigger opportunity is to get all my favorite wine drinkers also building Naughty into their lives. And that's when you can really start to see a shift.
So to talk about that, how do you, if somebody said, I mean, aside from somebody who's like, I'm just going to live a sober lifestyle, which it is, but incorporating Naughty into their portfolio, how would you encourage them to do that, or what advice would you give them?
Well, the first thing for us was making sure whenever we got the opportunity to be on a lovely wine list in a bar or restaurant, we really love to be on the wine list, not
Hmm.
just on a sort of spirit-free, non-alcoholic, like
Right.
adjunct menu. I grew up plant-based, so I'm used to getting the special menu, the vegetarian or vegan menu. And that's
Hmm.
great. Don't get me wrong, but you're really living the dream if you're on that adjunct menu and you're on the wine list, because
Yes.
that's when you get the blended drinking piece. And I was just in New York at Dirty French on the Lower East Side, for example, or the Chelsea Hotel in New York. And so many places around America are now doing that. And it's the Crane Club. There's an amazing sommelier, Abe Zarate, who was the first sober som, and he's a very famous sommelier who went
Hmm.
sober, and he's brilliant. And so a lot of smart wine people who are a bit more open minded are starting to list us like that. And that's when you start to live the dream. Because if we're lucky enough to be out in a bar tonight together having a good conversation, you might see a nice champagne and say, "Oh, do you fancy that, Amanda?" And I would say, "I would love a glass of that. I'd
Right.
love a glass of Krug with you, Leslie."
Uh-huh.
See naughty sparkling Chardonnay. I don't drink much and I've got an early start. I'll have one glass of Krug with you. What a treat. And then I'll move to naughty sparkling Chardonnay. That's really how I love to see my brand positioned. And then for home drinking, I just think what I hear from our fans and consumers, there are so many ways people approach it, but whether they just kind of decide midweek to hit up the naughty or have a few nights off wine, or whether they decide, I've got one wonderful customer and she buys naughty and she starts every Monday with a naughty mimosa
Does
because
she?
she gives her a pep in her step. And I was like, that's going to reframe any miserable Monday morning. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because there's no alcohol, low sugar, organic, like you can drink it like it's going out of fashion. You know what I mean? And
Right.
there's nothing negative about that. And so, what I really love most about my brand is we're making health choices without noticing.
Exactly. Because it's so hard where you're trying to make this a habit. And that wine event I told you that I had poured Naughty at this week, this guy said him and his partner at one time tried the Daniel diet. Have you tried that?
Oh, no,
It's
no.
okay, so it's biblical and it's basically everything that grows from the earth, right? So
Okay.
you can't have anything that can't be grown from the earth. So, it's basically a plant-based diet, a whole lot of grain or what have you.
Okay,
And if
so probably, yeah, sorry, I was just going to say I'd probably eat a little bit like that, but not
yes,
strictly.
yes,
Yes.
yes. And so if you don't eat like that and you are trying that, for the first time or what have you, it's really jarring and it's hard to commit to it. And so something like Naughty, it's not jarring. It's easy to fold into your daily routine. Like you want a glass of wine when you come home from work, but you may have a long night ahead of you or you have an early morning, what have you, but you enjoy that taste of wine.
Yes.
That
Yes.
is a great way to enfold that into your daily lifestyle.
Replace the ritual. And I've always got
Mhm.
Naughty Blanc is my white wine, which is predominantly Chenin with Chardonnay. That
Yeah,
is my kind of
I
midweek
love
go
that one.
to.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love that one. And actually, we were carrying the Blanc and
Yeah.
the red blend. And I had done like a staycation. I live in Maryland and on the Eastern Shore, like way, way Eastern Shore. I went into this little cozy bar, which I would not suspect. I'm such a wine geek. I always like read the labels and see what's in there. Like, what do we carry or
Yeah.
what should we be carrying? And I saw your sparkling rosé,
Oh, yes.
and
Good.
I was like, let me try that because I knew we carried the other one, and it's absolutely delicious. It's
Thank
absolutely
you.
and you
That's,
are
I
making
think,
impact.
that's the crowd pleaser. That's the one that even kind of non-wine people, so people who don't really think about wine, not like you and me,
Mhm.
that sparkling rosé is the universal crowd pleaser. You know what I mean? It's
Yes.
just like, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
very
it
happy
is
with
there.
that. And it sings with food. Try it next time with a bit of spice. If you like a bit of spice, it really sings with food as
Oh,
well.
that is great. I've poured it for new moms.
Yes, absolutely.
I've poured it for new
Absolutely.
I've poured it for new moms.
Oh, I'm
So,
glad. But also, I'm so happy to hear that story because when we pop up in little places people don't expect, that shows we're starting to permeate the mainstream.
mhm, you are. So what is before we get into our, like, non-wine related questions, what is next on the market for you guys? Where do you see yourself, in 2026 and beyond?
So it's really doubling down on that US sort of opportunity. I mean, we're in most states, but not all. You know, it's possible to
Mhm,
get us in all states because you've got some flexibility on direct to consumer, whether it's via our website, which I popped on there, or via Amazon. It is possible. But in terms of having an actual distribution hub in every state, so we're working on that and really building out our national retail. So we're currently in Sprouts and Total Wine, and any day now, possibly when this, if this is reshared later, the fresh markets. So it's really just
mhm.
building out our US national retail and independent retail. And the beautiful thing about Naughty is we can also come in through the healthy retail space as well. So we've got that flexibility. And then equally importantly, Leslie, is making sure we're in those bars, restaurants where you can really see the brand, enjoy it when you're out and about with your friends. So those two pillars are where we're really doubling down this year.
So are you completely um, only producing naughty, or do you still have your other sparkling line?
So we've gone all in naughty. No more champagne, no more alcohol. I'm 100% naughty now.
That is exceptional. That is exceptional. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you so much. I mean, the hard work continues. I think you know this. The more successful you get, you ride the challenges better because you're used to them. But the goalposts move.
Yeah, I
So
understand. So I have just a couple closeout questions for you. Um, do you make New Year's resolutions?
that's a really good question. And I guess I don't make resolutions in a fixed sense. I always think about that kind of try to be 1% better thing. And I think going full disclosure, like most founders, entrepreneurs I know, or successful business people, leaders, I'm sure some of this might resonate. I struggle to always protect my energy. I'm very
Mhm.
high energy. And then suddenly, if I don't protect it, because I do huge amounts of travel. So it's making sure I build in better moments of brief respite before the next wave. So I'm trying to work on a 1% sort of improvement there.
I 100% get you. And I was listening to I'm so embarrassed because I can't remember who said it because I really wanted to give him credit
Yeah,
for it. But he was saying that if you're going to invoke change in your life or some other pattern, that people part of the failure rate is because they didn't let go something else.
that's yeah,
Meaning
yeah.
meaning like if you're going to focus on this improving this task, you still can't do everything that you did before. That you
Right.
you have to let something go. And it doesn't mean like something serious, but maybe I always say like I'm going to focus on this. So to get time back, because time is a commodity, maybe I will stop scrolling so much on social media. Like I probably could build an hour back that. So focusing on that 1% is I completely understand. Like you just got to evaluate, well, what are the other priorities in my life?
But I love that metaphor you've shared. It is you have to be aware to let something go to free that gap. I think that's a very good reminder.
Yes. So you just brought it up. My next question was, you travel a lot. Like you must go through a passport book in a year.
I had to get I had to get a new passport because I ran out
Uh,
of pages. That was kind of annoying, right?
yes. So okay, so when you're not, because you travel a lot for work, so do you enjoy travel for pleasure, or would you just prefer to just stay home and chill?
I do because I'm a sun worshipper. I'm British, but I live in the wrong country. I love the sun so much. And so, yes, I love to travel if I get brief moments off. But, Leslie, again, I'm sure a lot of business leaders, entrepreneurs will identify. I over romanticize the switch off, and it doesn't
Mhm.
take me long to get my itchy feet to crack on again. I think there's no escaping the adrenaline is exciting. And I think it is probably quite addictive. And so it's just getting the discipline to try to read a book from start to end. On a
Right.
recent brief holiday, I took a whole bunch of books and I managed one. And I was about to beat myself up because I was doing other bits of work because I chose to let myself be pulled back in. And I think whenever anyone complains being a business leader or founder, I honestly feel blessed to have the choice because I think
Mhm.
most people in the world might not be lucky enough to have the choice, right? I've chosen this. I love what I'm doing. Do I work harder than most people would recommend? Yes. Do I choose that? Yes. I
Yes.
am. I am
Mhm.
my own destiny, aren't I, in that regard? And so I think that's how I sort of argue with myself in my brain. But
Hmm.
okay, you didn't read the stack of books, you read one book, and I actually finished it. So that was an
There you go.
achievement. Yeah.
Yes. I think that is fine. And I think to be an entrepreneur, it is a very challenging job, but you have to enjoy it.
Yes.
You know
I
what I
think,
mean?
yes.
And sometimes you just have to be careful, speaking from experience, that it doesn't intrude so much that it's consuming, because you enjoy it, you enjoy fixing it, and the next benchmark or what have you. But
Yeah, I think
it
you're bang on. Truthfully, yeah, I think most of us who look like we have some degree of success, it is definitely skewed the wrong way.
right. Hmm.
But for me, it's a choice. So
Yes.
I feel okay with that.
No, I think that's great. And so my last question that I like to ask all people is, if there was one wine that you were only able to drink for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Well, you're really giving us a hard one here. I mean, my heart's in champagne still, even though I hardly drink. There's a champagne maker called Jack Salos. I don't know whether you're familiar
Oh.
or your viewers are. I would urge you all to have a little look. It's not so much that it's expensive, it is, but it's tiny production. So Jack Salos for me is a genius champagne maker. So his champagne's in my heart. Krug Clos de Manille, which is single
Mhm.
vineyard Krug. I once tasted the 2002 back in the day when it was bang on. That is also in my heart. Coach Dury Merceau. As you can see, my experiences were all formed in France. I'll be honest with you though, I am never not happy with a really elegant Sonoma Chardonnay when I'm in your country.
Mhm. Mhm.
I have a soft spot for a top notch Sonoma Shard. And then naughty. I mean, of course, but that's technically cheating greatly because I think I've listed how many wines? Five, six. I've cheated.
No worries. Amanda, you have just been a delight.
Oh,
Thank you so
same.
much.
Thank
You've been
you.
this is a great way to start the weekend. Please tell everybody. I see you have your website, but tell everybody where they can follow you. And of course they can get their naughty from the Wine Concierge, and we'll deliver to your
Oh,
home.
please.
Yes, but if other places in the United States where they can also find naughty.
Sure. So just a sort of reminder, we're in national retail across the US. So we're in Sprouts, Total Wine, Fresh Markets now launching, our website, Wine Concierge. And the good news is find us on Instagram if you're there, which is at Naughty AF. And Naughty's got an O. And that's alcohol free for anyone who's wondering about the AF, Leslie. Um, so we're very easy to find. And on the website, if you want to speak to me and the team, we've got a very unusual situation. I have no bots. I'm very interested in AI, but nothing is AI behind our scenes. So you get the real team. We really care about any piece of communication. So
Mm,
anyone can talk to us direct anytime, which is really important to us as a brand.
thank you. Thank you for you're so busy, so thank you for making time for
I
us.
loved it. What a pleasure. And we need more people like you in the industry, Leslie. Thank you for being here.
Not a problem. And those who are watching us or maybe watching the recording, if you want more shows like this, just put it in the comments and follow us on the Wine Concierge. Take care, fam.